theory, Rego and Navarro, all these new things. Do we have now a sufficient understanding, actually, of how economic systems function that we could address these questions? And I'm asking that because you hear things like, well, if we raise the minimum wage, we would lose jobs because the companies would not make enough money to be. If we don't charge more for the drugs, then we can't do research. How much is that just BS, and how much is there real considerations that need to be taken into account?
BS, you mean bad science. It is BS, bad science. And good, careful, honest analysis shows that we could do so much better. And in our country, the odd part of our debate is we don't look at the real examples of other places. So it's not just in theory, but in practice that other places have already solved a lot of the problems that we are grappling with. I have a student who is a very conservative, former student from 40 years ago, who's very conservative, or 30 years ago, very conservative professor. And he wrote a book about what's wrong with America that I did not think was accurate at all. And he had a chapter about US healthcare. And he had a table that showed our healthcare system is twice as expensive and getting poorer results than all the other countries. And then immediately he said, so what do we need? We need more markets for healthcare. Instead of saying, well, what do those other 20 countries do? No markets at all. But he couldn't bring himself to ask honestly the question of what should we do? And why do they do better? He immediately jumped to ideology, that the only answer is the free market economy. Well, markets don't work in healthcare. The markets are unfair, they're inefficient, they have what Kenneth Arrow in 1963 called, introduced the idea of asymmetric information. They can't work as markets. All the other places figured this out. We instead gave the keys of the kingdom, as it were, to the pharmaceutical industry. And therefore we pay unbelievable amounts. Yes. Unbelievable amounts for medicines. So despicable, so unnecessary. We could develop more drugs rationally and have people get access to them, but we're not trying because they're trying to maximize the profits. And you give me the chance to talk about the most hated company, so I always like to talk about Gilead just for one moment. It's a company that owns the cure to hepatitis C, which is an epidemic disease in this country. They didn't even develop the medicine, they bought it. And it's a great, great cure, and it costs $1 a pill to make, and they've been charging $1,000 a pill. And you have to take 84 of them, so they've been charging $84,000 for a treatment dose for what costs $84 to make. And then they told their investors, it's great, we have a steady stream of infected people for years to come. They actually said this.
What's the name of the company?
Gilead, G-I-L-E-A-D. Their price is coming down a little bit because there are now some competitors. But boy, were they disgusting, and are they disgusting. And interestingly, when I wrote about this, I got my usual share of hate mail from Wall Street. And I had an exchange. Sometimes I answer these emails, and somebody wrote, Mr. Sachs, I don't understand. You're an economist. What's your problem? And I wrote back, I said, my problem is that the prices of markup is 1,000 times and people are suffering. And he wrote back and said, you're an economist, what's your problem? And I wrote back and I said, well, people are dying. And he wrote back to me, absolutely, honestly, straightforwardly, but Mr. Sachs, that's how our system works. That is honestly the Wall Street mindset. Not, we have a problem, how do we solve it? How do we address these trade-offs? What could be done? Is the pricing right? What other options for drug development are there? No, that's how our system works.